gonna die. Episode 13.
Welcome back, folks. Good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I hope you're doing it well, and as always, I want to thank you for joining me here. So we're continuing our delve into the inner workings of a company that I'm not able to name. And it's not that I fear any legal repercussions at this point. The notion of that being a concern on any level is pretty funny to me. It's just that if I even try to upload this, it will get hit with an immediate strike and either be edited or removed. So it's pretty wild to me that all of humanity's science and the raw power of mathematics are dedicated to standing guard for corporations with names like Hacken, Slaggerat, and Hungle. You know, stupid shit. But this is the world we live in, and these are the rules that we have to abide by. So anyway, all of the diary logs that I'm about to share have needed a lot of cleaning up. Over 10 years ago, Chris translated them from French to English, but Google Translate has gotten better over the past decade, so I've kind of redone that and made sure that everything makes some kind of sense, but there may be parts that are lost in translation or were even incomprehensible when they were in French. And what I'm about to read here is the investigation of a woman named Amelie. It's in the form of a kind of diary that began in 2008. And I'd really like to warn you that some of the things that she uncovers here are deeply unpleasant. And I've adjusted the names to prevent the harassment of any survivors. It's a hard read, and it's not just because of the translation. It's because it's very personal to somebody. It definitely reads like these are notes that were to be expanded upon. And because of that, it is very much stream of consciousness. And I've tried to round off the raw edges without diminishing any meaning or adding too much of my own colour to this. And where I don't understand a reference, I've removed it. I'm less of a localization expert than I am a translator, and I am not a translator. I do not speak French. In fact, I'm probably going to butcher a lot of the names in this, so I would like to apologize. I don't know how to apologize in French. I almost said merci, which is thank you, but I would like to apologize in advance for that. I just simply don't have the time to refine this properly. Things have been growing increasingly dangerous and unstable, and I have no choice but to press on. Amelie's Investigation, Part 1. April 9th, 2008. My sister Celeste and I have always been different. Branches from the same tree stretching in opposite directions. I don't like her, but I do love her. There was a time when I did love her, when we were cynical teenagers, all concerts and crazy. Daughters of grunge, heirs to the fucked up new millennium where all your heroes die young. We were pumped up on promise, potential and pills, living our lives fast and dangerous. But our parents wanted professional children, ones they could parade before their friends, and Celeste, ever eager to please, put aside her anarchic streak and stepped into the rigid world of law, a perfectly acceptable career. But I chose art, and not the kind of art that they cared for. While I immersed myself in the vibrancy of creation, she walked a structured path. She crafted a life that fit neatly into our parents' expectations. The respectable career, the charming husband, Sebastian, a sandblasted suit golem who could only speak in clipped buzzwords, and their delightful daughter, Melody. Melody was a ray of sunshine, a free spirit with golden curls and a devilish little smile. In her, I saw the sparking creativity and rebellious streak that her mother had put aside, and I would encourage it whenever I could. I could tell whenever we were alone, that she wanted what I had. She would listen eagerly to my stories, but she had none of her own. She'd chosen to limit herself, to imprison herself, which she could never admit. Instead, she hid behind an air of smug self-satisfaction, as though I was immature. Time told the truth of it, though. I'd always known their perfect life was bullshit. And when Celeste discovered Sebastian's affairs, her meticulously ordered world began to crumble. She reached out to me, but I was deeply engrossed in a new series of paintings, works that I felt could redefine my career. I'd signed a contract to fulfill orders for the next year and had very little time to spare on a situation that could interrupt my process. She had few friends, and the prospect of divorce left her isolated. I recommended she join a gym, and she slammed the phone down on me. A few months later, when my work slowed down enough, I proposed that we meet up at a small cafe tucked away from the city's bustle. When I arrived, she looked tired. The shadows under her eyes betrayed sleepless nights. Melody clung to her hand, quiet and observant, very different from the girl that I knew. Our conversation was strained. She told me she'd taken my advice and joined Mindflow. She'd found friends who understood her. I joked that if they cared, they'd have told her to fix her hair. It didn't go down well. Celeste accused me of being distant, of not supporting her when she needed family the most. Perhaps there's some truth to her words, but I had to remind her that we all have our own paths to walk and our own battles to fight. It's not on me to fix her life. Harsh words were exchanged, old wounds were reopened, and we parted on extremely bitter terms. I dedicated the next few months to my art and thought little of her. Then one night, Sebastian hammered at my door. Melody had vanished and so had Celeste. He pleaded for my help. He was angry and distraught, desperate, demanding to know all about Celeste's new friends, but I had no answers to give, especially when he was screaming so loudly. I tried to shut the door, but he wedged himself between it. I thought he was going to strike me. I could see his fists balled, his knuckles were white. But then he took 2 steps back. He looked deeply ashamed. I slammed the door and watched him through the peephole. I came very close to calling the police before he left. But he looked so pathetic and sad, completely lost and adrift. I watched him walk away, and that was the last time I saw him alive. When next I heard about Sebastian, it was because of the accident. His car had veered off-road, colliding with a tree before bursting into flames. If it had been just him, then I would not have shed a tear. But Celeste and Melody were with him. It was Melody's loss that hit me the hardest. A small frame fused to the seatbelt in the back seat, mercifully unconscious when the flames claimed her. Unidentified remains in the front passenger seat were presumed to be Celeste, and the authorities closed the case swiftly. But something about it felt wrong. She would never have shared a car with him. There was no chance. Even though we were estranged, she would have contacted me the moment that they reconnected. I know she would. Our parents refused to listen to me at the funeral. They were broken, the loss of the good daughter and the granddaughter destroying any hope of a legacy. In the aftermath, my art began to change. The vibrant colours I'd wielded with confidence faded to muted tones. Fractures appeared across my canvases, or cracks and jagged lines that wove intricate patterns. I'd spend hours drizzling the thinnest lines of spider-webbed paint. And when I looked at the finished article, it would hurt my eyes. Distributors told me that my work had taken on a new edge, that it was disturbing, not better or worse, but most definitely not what was agreed upon, and that they could not sell it. I began to see strange symbols in my work, spirals and shapes that I did not remember creating. I could no longer paint lightly, with joy. Everything was poisoned with alien genius. In the day, I was crazed with caffeine and cocaine, and at night, speed would help me to maintain the pace. When day turned to night or night turned to day, they were interchangeable to me. I'd smooth the transition with a spliff to make certain my brain got some rest. And it was in those moments that I began to hear Celeste. I would settle into a beanbag and hear her singing Heart-Shaped Box, a song from when we were young and full of angst and potential. And the more effort I put into perfecting these dark artworks, the clearer she would become. I would hum along with her. And then she began to speak. And that I did not like, because I could not understand her. She wasn't speaking English or French or German or any of the tongues she knew. It made the lights flicker, almost bringing me to seizure. I began to beg her to stop, to tell me what she wants. And instead, she would only babble louder and faster. One evening, after a day of forcing myself to try and paint what the distributors demanded, what was stipulated in my contract, I began to lash out. My failures were stacking up. It was making me frustrated. I grabbed a can of paint and began to spatter it across the canvas, casting those hair-thin lines. And that was when I saw it. I fell backwards, dizzy, nauseous, heart thundering as I thought back to the images from that terrible wreck. I paid a cop for pictures of the accident, ghoulishly staring at them to try and comprehend how Celeste was still alive. I grabbed my laptop and opened the file. They'd lost none of their power. My niece's body, her charred head lolling forward in the chair, the blackened husk of the vehicle, and those hairline cracks in the window. It was the glass that I stared at. If traced, they would copy almost one-to-one with those I had painted onto the canvas before me. And I was sure they would map onto the ones that I had been painting for weeks. But it was the other photograph in the set that made me fall to my knees and vomit. A wider view of the crash site and the tree they'd slammed into, its thin branches stripped naked by winter. Were I to trace them over the tracings of fractured glass, they would be exactly the fucking same. I didn't know what it meant. The images were real, they were unaltered, but the impossibility of it made my head throb, and I drew myself up, stumbling backwards into my beanbag chair. I grabbed one of the half-smoked joints from the ashtray. I took a deep drag, and that's when Celeste whispered into my ear, "Come find me." I've spent the past 6 months preparing. All of my research and notes can be found in this file. Since that night, Celeste has not spoken to me again, and I have not picked up a brush. I've tried to, but there's no spark, no drive, no creativity, and it's killing me as surely as a noose, and as surely as the cocktail of drugs that I've made my diet. Finding out where that incredible creativity came from, that wellspring of bleak abundance, and what happened to my sister is all that drives me now. Part of me considered that Celeste may have been trying to reach me through my art, but she had no talent for it. There was something else there, a raw, creative force that was intoxicating in its own way. I was certain that all of this was related, and so I began to look into her new friends. Ever since the funeral, I've let my hair grow and I've lost weight. My appetite has been stunted, but the uppers can also claim some responsibility. There was some conspiracy behind the deaths, because if Celeste was alive, then there was a reason for it. And there were significant resources to stage such an accident. I won't be recognizable as I follow her steps into this world. Where is Celeste? Why kill Sebastian and Melody? What force can connect with me so deeply it reorders my thoughts? These are the questions that I want answers to. For some time now, I've been participating in online discussions with members of Mindflow. I've even seen her old account and pictures of her in person at events that they call gatherings. Her black hair in a bun, her plain face even plainer for lack of makeup or the distraction of expensive clothes. smiling and happy in a group photo of other smiling, happy people. I purposefully not joined the same group as her, but I found another one. They all link up at greater gatherings anyway, and if I already appear welcome, then I'm less likely to be questioned. They practice shared breathing, a synchronization of breaths for long periods of time within an hierarchy of achievement and obedience. There are scandals, there's talk of bullying and cultish behavior, but I'm not easily led and I'm not easily fooled. I'm going into this with my eyes wide open and nothing is going to stop me from finding the truth. I've engaged with them for long enough online. I've come to know them, and tomorrow we meet in person at their gathering site. I'll be travelling out to La Forêt de Brocéliande, and what follows will be my record of this investigation. April 14th, 2008. They do not allow for any electronics on site, but I managed to keep my phone hidden. The first day was strange. The people were friendly. They're not my people. They're too controlled. They're too rehearsed. They talked a lot about finding unity and peace and bettering themselves through their exercises. It was all mundane and very boring. I made a friend of Loris. He's from Brittany and also new. He was quick to talk about his problems with drugs and I was able to relate. He has such a kind heart and helped to carry my bags. It all seemed so ordinary and so benign that I almost forgot why I was here. Antoine, the guide and leader of this gathering, was attending a conference in Germany and so wouldn't be joining us this weekend. As new faces, Loris and I were treated really well, almost embarrassingly so, and I could tell that he was uncomfortable with it. But I'm not one to tell people treating me well to stop, and he followed my lead. On the Saturday, after a day of casual philosophy, hiking and breathing sessions, we were provided a table, and the older hands at the gathering waited on us. When a young woman whose name I did not know got tripped up and dropped my dessert, I jokingly said she'd ruined my evening because I was really looking forward to it. She kept smiling, but there were tears in her eyes when I saw her next. At the end of dinner, as the sun began to set, they gathered everyone for an hour of breathing. It felt so relaxing beneath the trees, like I was part of not just this small group, but the world. The setup was simple. A stump in the center of a spiral upon which the guide sits and leads the rest of us in shared breathing. And from there, the spiral is drawn out in white paint, sectioned off for different levels, with those who follow the breath well being the closest to the heart of it all. I was expecting something darker, but there was nothing untoward, beyond the sense of people walking on eggshells. But I can understand why. They made mistakes in front of the new crowd, and they seemed very, very keen to keep us. I made a new friend, and despite all of the build-up and all of my anxieties, I had an enjoyable time. But I have not forgotten why I'm here. April 29th, 2008. Myself and Loris kept in touch over the past couple of weeks, meeting up for coffee. It wasn't romantic on my side, at least. I can tell that he finds me attractive, but most do, and he isn't my type. We'd meet and practice the shared breath. Waiting for the daily message was time to sync ourselves up, and then following the recording. The recording cost €30 and would need recalibrating every few months, by which they meant buying another recording. I don't know if this came down from the greater leadership or was just a local scam. Speaking of leadership, Antoine has returned and will be meeting us at the gathering tomorrow. May 3rd, 2008. Met with Antoine this weekend. He was a short, older man with kind eyes. Thoughtful. They instantly made you feel important. His hair was a salt and pepper tangle, and he would constantly tap his lips with 2 fingers. He welcomed Loris and myself warmly, apologizing for not being there the last time. I could tell he was more interested in me than Loris. And he was charming. He made today very easy. He's deeper than Loris, and it's obvious why he's a leader. He has that quality that makes people around him feel more interesting, and it makes you want to hear more from him. We took our first oaths today. These are tasks we take on to serve ourselves, the gathering, and the world. all very grandiose. Myself and Loris swore to learn everybody's name by the end of the day, to laughs and cheers. Everybody took it much more seriously than expected. And at the end of the day, I recalled them flawlessly. I've always had a good memory, but Loris missed several. And there was an uncomfortable space. It was like during the space between the shared breaths when there's nothing but silence. I thought Antoine was going to strike Loris, but instead he laughed and so did everybody else, puncturing that awkwardness. I thought that was it until he said that as a forfeit, Loris would now be known as Stefan. I thought it was a joke, until with complete seriousness he re-welcomed Loris to the group as Stefan, and everyone immediately began overemphasizing the name. It was as if they were afraid that if they forgot it, there would be consequences. May the 4th, 2009. Loris is not happy. The others, even those we'd become close to, barely spoke with him. Antoine spent the day answering questions and talking about the deeper meaning behind our breathing and what it means to us. He purposefully used the name Stefan in the conversation. It was never said any way but polite and never broke the flow of his speaking, but it was still hard and telling, used like a club. He is dangerously smart and I need to watch myself around him. I need to become one of his guides. That's the way to advance. I have to work harder. The next few entries don't really have anything of interest to share. They're mostly spent hanging around with Loris and attending meetings. Amelie never calls Loris Stefan, even as they're becoming close. She purposefully avoids using any name for him at gatherings, so to avoid falling afoul of Antoine, who she talks about very warily. There is only one entry from this period which is worth sharing. July the 22nd, 2008. During the shared breath at sunset, I felt it. The artist in me swelling with talent and eagerness. I could feel myself creating. I'm on the right track. I can't give birth to it. I can't transfer this gift from inside to out just yet. My body feels incapable of it. If I work harder, I can progress deeper. I can connect harder. Maybe I can deliver on my dreams. I can find Celeste. As time goes by, she continues to share articles about the organization and dives into their practices. Mostly, she shares material she's actively working on to improve her breathing technique. She's always mentioning that she's on the cusp of achieving the connection with art that she felt that night when Celeste spoke to her. So how much of that is just her expectations and how much is reality, I honestly can't say. I mean, there's little point in sharing these. They are mostly musings on how much better she is at breathing than other people and how much better she is than Loris at managing alignment. And there's a lot of that. I feel very sorry for him. He never ingratiates himself with Antoine. He is kept at a distance by others. He fails his oath several times and is punished harshly each time. Never a physical component to it where harm is done to him, but always humiliating, like mean-spirited. Amelie never talks about why Loris joined or if he even told her. She only mentions that he's a restaurant worker and maybe his lower status, and those are her words, most definitely not mine, or why the gathering treats him so harshly. The only reason that I can see why he stays is because of Amelie. 7th of November, 2008. The regulators are here for an extended weekend. I have little time. They're constantly ringing the bell for shared breaths. Everyone must attend. They're intense. An American man and a woman, dressed for California in a French autumn. I am thriving. My practice has paid off and they are impressed. Loris is not faring as well. He overthinks. 8th of November, 2009. Antoine and regulators invited me for private meeting. They want me to make the next step and visit Yggdrasil House in Cologne for affirmations. They want money, a lot of money, but it's worth it. I am so good at this. Loris asked me for help and I gave what I could, but he's just not getting it. He stays at the edge of the spiral even as I progress toward its heart. 9th of November, 2008. A shared oath with Loris went poorly. We swore to clean everyone's cars and leave them spotless. I was distracted, considering how to raise funds for the next stage of this journey, and I scratched the regulator's hired car. It was an accident. During inspection, they found it. He looked so sad when I blamed it on him, but more hurt that I called him Stefan when I did it. I had never done so before. He didn't deny it. He didn't argue back. He accepted it. Because he scratched the car, they said he should be scratched himself. He didn't want this, and neither did I, but the regulators were watching, and they needed to be impressed. Other regulars from the gathering held him down, and I did not hesitate. I stepped forward and took the keys, dragging them across his back deep enough to draw blood. I could tell they were unsatisfied. I had no choice but to go deeper, and to return their smile as they smiled at me when I pushed the sharp edge into the cut, twisting it like in a lock to split his skin. He was screaming, but thankfully he passed out, either from pain, shock, or the weight of people holding him down. We have a doctor here and they fixed him up. It will scar, but it was better that I did it than Antoine. He was more than smiling. I could see that he was enthralled. In some ways, I saved Loris's life. I impressed Antoine. I impressed the regulators. I must get the money together. 14th of November, 2008. Loris will not answer my calls. I visited his home and he refused to speak to me. I needed to ask him about borrowing half of the 10,000 euros I would need to progress, but I don't think he wants to hear me or hear my reasons. I'm sorry, guys. I fuck her. Oh my God. That's, this is not in the text. This is me breaking through that because I find that deeply upsetting. Anyway, let me continue. Loris was never serious about walking the spiral like I am. He doesn't have the reason I have to progress. I'm driven, he is dead weight. But he was someone who cared about me, and I wish it could be different. I'm selling the jewelry Celeste left for me in her will tomorrow. What she lacks in taste, she made up for in value. And if she lives, she'll understand why I have to trade it all in. November the 21st, 2008. Antoine called. The gathering in Cologne will need some preparation. He wants to meet for dinner and then go out to the gathering site. Antoine confuses me. There's no attraction between us, but his cruelty and his charisma are so intertwined. I want to like him and I want him to like me, but I also want to be as far away from him as possible. I have no choice but to accept. November 26th, 2008. Dinner was a test. The restaurant was the restaurant where Loris worked. I could see him waiting tables, and I could tell that Antoine wanted to see how I would react. He knew that we had been friends. I don't think he knew that Loris had not spoken to me since that night. Loris saw me, and I completely tunnel-visioned onto Antoine, pretending that he did not exist. I don't know how my friend reacted, given how he hadn't answered my calls. I'd expect that he was glad that I didn't make it awkward. Antoine delighted in this and told me he knew from the start that I was special. After dinner, he drove me out to Forêt de Brosseland, and beneath the boughs of those ancient trees told me about the first father and king, about his blessed nights and our place in shaping his realm. His tone was patronizing, like he was a teacher and I was a slow student and I did not care for it. He assumed that I would balk at the mystical elements, not realizing that it was these that had guided me onto the path in the first place. He told me of twilight lands where creation and destruction became intertwined, of dark roads that lead to this kingdom and how few are suited to walk upon them, but that those who do reap rewards beyond anything we can conceive of in this limited world of ours. He told me that I was one of the swiftest adepts to the one breath that he had ever seen, and he was so impressed with me. The conversation was so frustrating because of its delivery. This narcissist trying to tell me about my achievements whilst aggrandizing himself. The weight of his revelations was so lightened by his choice of words that I struggled to feign interest in the depth of them, and he mistook my lack of enthusiasm for failure to understand, which annoyed me even more. He framed it as a metaphor, a fable to soften the telling of it to less equipped minds. I started to loathe him for misjudging me. I barely listened to his tale until it wound back to my part in it. My breathing aligned closely to the rhythm of one of the truly ancient, one of the blessed seven who walked with the king in prehistory. Even though the one breath is aligned to the king, none can be exact, and those slight differences are what separate servants from the savant. It is this perfect resonance with one of the king's blessed ancients that grants me the right to become an aspirant, to travel to Yggdrasil House, and attempt to join his coterie of knights. I told Antoine that this is what I expected, that I had felt the touch of something greater when engaging in shared breathing several times, and that I knew it was only me who brushed up against that connection. At first I thought Antoine was reverent in his silence, but I detected jealousy, annoyance. He bade me to sit in the spiral where we would share breath during the gatherings and guided me toward alignment. Periodically, he would ask me questions about my readiness to walk the shadowed path, and each time I would answer yes, never breaking rhythm. I could feel the shared breaths of others performing the rite around the world, that even though I knelt alone, I was part of something greater, that I was greater. I felt the warmth, the fellowship, and the calm. I saw patterns and weaves and shapes swelling in my deeper mind, ever flowing, forming works of brilliance that danced across my brain. And I could hear Celeste calling me forward, telling me to see the truth. I could hear her encouraging me, calling for me to press on. No ghost or phantom, as real in my ear as the scattered footsteps that I could hear approaching. The muffled struggles, the grunts. Antoine told me to open my eyes, but to remain aligned. There were 4 regulars from the gathering, 3 men and a woman. I knew their names, but I was so in flow that I knew their dreams. I knew their hopes. I knew all of their horrors. They were connected to me, but lesser, smaller. I saw the flow of their lives up to this point and felt their emotional turbulence as they wrestled with a burlap sack. One of the men was nursing a cut lip, and I felt it. Another threw punches into the sack, and my knuckles felt the impact. Antoine was sitting cross-legged on the stump at the center of the spiral. We were almost perfectly in sync with our breathing, and I could feel the loathing coming off him with every exhalation. He despised me. I felt it like hammer blows. He wanted the connection I had. It went beyond jealousy. Like me, he was on the edge of understanding, frustrated by how tantalizingly close it was. He did not sleep, he barely ate. All he did was breathe and seethe that he was not chosen, that he was not elevated. He knew I knew. Our shared breath connected us, transferred our mutual disgust without words, unpolluted by others in the gathering, unable to be softened by their simplistic thoughts. It was the purest sensation I have ever felt, a clarity of hatred so close to divine it brought me to the cusp of ecstasy. It was not a transference of thoughts. It was more primal than that, completely lacking in language, a kind of instinct. The spiral was empty yet full. Shadows filled the gaps where others would normally sit or kneel, and with every exhalation those shades spoke a word. Balamara. Whatever drugs I had become accustomed to were nothing against that word. It flushed my veins with cold and pulled my skull away from my brain. It was every upper and every downer and every lie I'd ever told myself about tolerance. I almost dropped breaths. I almost slipped out of sequence, but I held myself to the pattern. The sack slumped into the dirt in front of the stump, barely moving. I knew who was inside. He'd shared breaths within the spiral, and I could feel his terror, his pain. Loris. Antoine rose, and keeping his eyes locked on mine, planted a vicious kick. There was no physical impact, but my nerves flashed with pain. I could feel the gag in Loris's mouth, hard and tight, and bending teeth from how crudely it had been forced into place. Antoine's satisfaction rolled off him, his glee as he laid into Loris, and his eagerness that I should fail here, that I should slip a breath. I'm not ashamed of what I chose to do. Everything I do is to find my sister, nothing else matters. I rose to join Antoine and delivered kick after kick to the sack. With every blow, the spiral began to turn and to twist, and I knew Balamara. I could feel his presence, not the king, but the blessed ancient. 10,000 years of serenity lifting my heart, elevating my base human soul, and I knew then that we were bound within his consciousness, that we were sharing his endless dream, that whatever pain I delivered, I felt in kind but dull, that brutality softened and shared, for this was Balamara's gift. At the time I did not think, I had no thoughts, it was pure instinct, a primordial guidance that told me what I was doing was good, that it was just, that it was proof of devotion. There was little of Loris left within that sack. The beating had turned him to more sand than self, a million shifting grains, never settling to become coherent, battered into dust, his life spilling over my thoughts, dissipating slowly into the still waters of the shared breath. The chanting from the spectres grew louder and louder, the name repeated faster and faster, Balamara, Balamara, the breath almost a steady rhythm, growing rapid, forcing me to give more of myself to it. Those calm waters, the gestalt peace of Balamara, began to rage, and I felt around the sack for Loris's wet skull and dragged him by the neck to the tree stump at the center of the spiral, the strength of tens of thousands and the will of one guiding my arm. He spoke then. One soft, pleading word. And I lifted his head, and I slammed it against the edge of the stump again and again. I don't know what he said. It was an irrelevance. I wasn't paying attention. The clamour rose around me and my breathing grew erratic, yet somehow remained aligned. The sack tore open, spilling blood and brains across my hands. I grabbed Loris's hair, his long, beautiful hair. I hauled him up to slam him down. His jaw dislocated, his nose snapped right and then left, his tongue lacerated on his shattered teeth. I didn't feel any of the pain, not anymore. Instead, the regulars beside the stump writhed, clutching their faces and screaming. They had lost track of the breath. That was what separated us, what made me better than them, better than him. Antoine too was struggling to maintain. Loris's heart stopped, and so did mine. I could feel it in my chest like a rock. But I did not fall. I did not falter. I breathed and breathed and breathed, and the world before me was torn away, ripped from my eyes to reveal the endless possibilities of the profane infinite. I saw the tree that was not a tree, and the king upon his throne of bark and bone. I saw the insanity of his duty, the raw madness of his calling, and then I felt the hands of his servant upon me, Balamara, terrible and strong and loving, and my heart began once more, changed, improved, aligned, and the cowl once more fell upon my vision. The regulars were dead. Blood ran from their ruptured eyes. Antoine lay breathing heavily against the stump. At my feet, the sack torn open was a mass of reds and whites and purples. There was little flesh remaining upon Loris's face, so thoroughly he had been beaten. And I let out a small laugh. Not at my friend, of course. I still had respect for who he had been, but I laughed because the pattern of his brain matter as it seeped into the soil was the most beautiful piece of art I had ever seen. And it was what I had been on the cusp of creating for months, finally given form. The days since that night have been blurred. And I've repeated my craft over and over, reveling in the gift that Loris gave me and my newfound connection with the blessed ancient. But it has all begun to slow, to revert. I filled my Parisian loft with marvels and fancies, delighting in a talent unleashed. But I've begun to slow, and soon I will be back to the cusp. On the edge again, unable to reach satisfaction, and I cannot bear the thought of it. I've had to come to accept that this is not a righteous crusade for justice, that this is a journey, and that while I am seeking Celeste, I've already found so much more. The potential peak of my life already stretches so much higher than it ever did. But I worry about the cost. 10,000 euros is a significant sum, and even selling Celeste jewelry barely got me over the line. Next month, I will be at Yggdrasil House, and it already feels too far away. November 29th, 2008. The bodies of Loris and the 4 regulars were found today in a car crash. Almost the exact same setup as Celeste and Melody. I'm angry and I'm empty. Part of me wonders if they know who I am, if they've known all along, that this is some game and they are taunting me. December 3rd, 2008. Attended Loris's funeral today with Antoine and other regulars. It was hard. Loris is in my dreams. His body pulled into the trunk of a colossal tree. His arms stretched upwards, twisting into branches, eyeless, his mouth a hollow in the bark. I lean in to listen, in the hope that he'll repeat his final word, that I will hear it, that I will understand it, but all I hear is wind and screams. I'm not sleeping well, torn between guilt and ambition. I've never claimed to be a good person, but I have never believed in evil before, let alone believe that I could be evil. Loris's mother could not have known what I did, but when she looked at me from the pulpit as she read a eulogy for her son, I felt condemned. The sorrow in her voice branded me, and Antoine put his arm around me, feigning compassion. I hate feeling this way. I hate Antoine for causing it. My heartbeat is not my own anymore. I can feel the difference. When I close my eyes, I see the shadow of the throne and those swaying branches scratch my eyes. There is no comfort in this life, only an ever-crawling anxiety, an anticipation of what highs I'll reach, but also what depths await when I fall. That is about as much as I can stomach for now. I'm going to take a break and I will return with part 2 of Amelie's investigation soon. Thank you for listening.